This morning, I showed you the true role that microorganisms are playing in disease. I showed you that these microorganisms are everywhere. The germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions. The other theory in medicine today is the gene theory. And notice with the gene theory and the germ theory, it takes away all responsibility on the person for what's happening. It's not me, it's the germ. It's not me, it's in the gene. Are we totally subject to these? You see, that takes away our free choice. And that's not the way God works. The fact is, genetics may load the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. Dr. Mark talked about it this morning. He talked about the area of epigenetics, how our lifestyle and even our thoughts can turn our genes on or off. So praise God again, even in genetics, we have a choice. We're not subject as if we have no choice to that. Did you know the Bible talks about our genes? In Psalm 139, starting at verse 1, the Bible says, "Thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down sitting and mine uprising, and understandeth my thought afar off. Thou hast compassed my path, and art acquainted with all my ways. Thou hast set me behind and before, and hast laid thine hand upon me. There is not a word in my tongue, but thou, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit? And whither shall I flee from thy presence? If I make my bed in hell, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and go to the furthest part of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall behold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about thee, for the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day." Beautiful words to show that no matter where we go, God is there. And then the psalmist continues. The psalmist says that even in the womb, thou hand hast fashioned me. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret. But before it goes to that, it says, I will praise thee. It's the verse we know very well. Psalm 139, verse 14, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet imperfect. In my book were all thy members written, when as yet there were none of them. I gave birth to 6 babies, but when they were being curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, I don't know what was happening. I did not have any scans. Did you hear that? I did not have any scans, because I know that the great God of heaven ordained that baby be wrought in me. And there is not enough evidence out to show whether those scans are having an effect on the baby. But as that baby was being curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, God's eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. Yet being imperfect? You see, in thy book were all my members written. There's a book. Did you know that in the very DNA inside every cell in the body, that how we were curiously wrought was written? In thy book were all my members written, which in continuous were being fashioned, when as yet there were none of them. So in the DNA, the formula for making little old me was all written in the DNA. Let's have a look. God doesn't have to have a very big book because we have 100 trillion cells in the body and 75 trillion. 75 trillion have this DNA in there. Right in the nucleus of the cell is the DNA. The DNA is the genetic code that determines the colour of our eyes, the colour of our hair, the colour of our skin. When I was in Samoa in April, it was a huge crowd. I think it was nearly 2,000 people. So they gave me a bodyguard, a 6'10" Samoan young man. If he stood in front of me, you couldn't even see me. He stood next to me like this. If I moved, he moved. 6'10", wow. I think I'm only about 5'2". It's in the genes. And we have 23 chromosomes from our mother. We have 23 chromosomes from our father. There's a huge amount of information in here. In thy book were all my members written. In this book, and it is like a book, it is like a library. There's a huge amount of information in there. And as one professor who was trying to compare this to give us an understanding, he said if you were to put all that information into alphabetical language and put it in paperback books and pile them up on top of one, it would go to the moon and back. I can hardly get my mind around that. And yet the psalmist, in that Psalm 139, verse 14, he didn't know that. And he said, I will praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. And he didn't know about the cell. He didn't know about the inside workings of the cell that we know today. Didn't I say there were 100 trillion? Where are the other 25? 25 trillion are the red blood cells. And the red blood cells are made in the bone marrow. We know that, in fact, it's a very well-known proverb, Proverbs 3, starting at 5. It says, trust in the Lord with all thine heart, lean not unto thine own understanding, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes, fear the Lord, depart from evil, and it shall be strength to thy navel, marrow to thy bones. It's in the marrow of the bones that our red blood cells are made, and a lot of our white blood cells. And our red blood cells, they're the carriers. The Bible says the life of the flesh is in the blood in Leviticus 17:11. It is the blood that carries the nutrients, it carries the oxygen, it carries the water, it takes away the waste. And the blood also contains the white blood cells. But 75 trillion of our cells, that's our eye cells and our hair cells and our tissue cells and our muscle cells, they all have a DNA. And we are constantly being made according to the formula, according to the pattern. I have 4 sons, 4 daughters. And the 4 sons are all tradesmen. Builders and tilers and landscapers, carpenters. And before they build, before they landscape, before they tile, what have they got to do? They've got to make a plan. Now, they're all cooks. I taught them to cook from a very young age. They're all proficient cooks. I aimed to send to the world young people that were self-sufficient. They could all garden. They could all knit. Yes, even the boys. They could all sew. They can all cook. They can all look after themselves. From a young age you start. Got that, adults? From a young age you start. And when they cook, what do they got to have? A plan. I make clothes. I'm just finished knitting a little jacket and some booties for my 25th grandchild who will be born in October. I needed a plan. I needed a pattern. Same with our body. There's a pattern, there's a plan, and it's written inside the nucleus of every cell. In 1953, it made headlines in the newspaper. Secret of life had been discovered. Watson and Crookes, two scientists, had been able to unravel the DNA. That DNA can be pulled out. It can be almost 2 meters long, and then it's coiled back up in there. These two men thought that when they understood the DNA, they could just adjust the DNA, we'd all be well. Are we all well? We're far from well. But you know, they came up with a dilemma. Who put the information in there? There's only one answer, and that is the great God of heaven. Unfortunately, man is ever looking for a way that he doesn't have to acknowledge that he has a maker. And to live life to its fullest, we've got to surrender everything to our maker. Because he's the only one that knows. And in Psalm 139, 15 and 16, I'll recite it again, considering what I've just told you. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did me see my substance. I was the mother and I didn't know what was going on in there. But thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. In thy book were all my members written, which in continuance were being fashioned, when as yet there were none of them. I didn't know what was going on there. I didn't know if I was going to have a boy or a girl. I did not know that. But you know what I did? I trusted that my Father in heaven knows that. And so I'm so sorry when I hear that a pregnant woman is told she has to have a scan every month. Don't? So no, thank you. I'm the master of my destiny. A lady contacted me and she said, Barbara, I've got 5 weeks to go in my pregnancy, and I just had a scan, and they tell me that the baby is not big enough. The baby isn't growing properly. They said that the placenta is starting to break down. They want to take the baby early. I said, if I was you, I would say no, thank you. And if I was you, I would not have another scan. Do you know sometimes they can be wrong? And yet I'm just shocked how many people put total trust in the princess, total trust in the blood test, total trust in the scans. Put not your trust in princes, says Psalm 146, verse 3. Neither in the Son of Man, in whom there is no help. But Barbara, what if there's something wrong? Do you know, my great God of heaven knows. And did you know if there is severe damage in this baby, most of the time, something like 98% of the time, the mother will miscarry. So I said to this mother, are you feeling well? She said, I am. I said, baby's moving? She said, baby is moving. I said, well, if I were you, I would not have another scan, and I would wait until you go into labour naturally. You know, it's like a peach. You know, we've got a peach tree. We touch the peach, it won't come, it's not ready. We touch this peach, oh, it just falls into my hand. It's ready. And the cervix, which is that soft little cushion between the birth canal and the uterus, is like a peach. And when it's ripe, then the body goes into labour. Did you hear that? Just let it come naturally. She decided to do that. She decided to do that. She decided to reject fear. Did you know that faith grows strong by earnest conflict with fear and doubt? Go to battle with the fear and doubt. Her baby was born naturally. The baby was the perfect size. The placenta was perfect. Did you know that God destroyed the world by flood because they started to sacrifice babies? I went to the Ark Encounter a few days ago, and they went through this area where you could see what the world was like before the flood. And I found it in one corner. There were steps going up, and there were mothers carrying their babies up and giving them to the priests. They would give them to another priest who would throw them into the fire. And then on the steps there were mothers coming down like this. I was reading in the book, Patriarchs and Prophets, that God destroyed the Sodom and Gomorrah by fire because they'd started to sacrifice babies. Are they sacrificing babies today? They are. And that's on the altar of medicine. How many babies die through the childhood vaccinations? How many babies die because they're taken too early? I read a book. I love reading people's true stories. It was called The Midwife of Auschwitz. She was a midwife in the concentration camp, Auschwitz. She was in her 50s, and she was put into Auschwitz because she was a freedom fighter. They caught her, they put her into Auschwitz. In 2 years, she delivered 3,000 live babies. Now, did everyone get that? 3,000 live babies. What was the condition of these women? They were suffering from the most severe malnutrition. The conditions were appalling. It was filthy. And she never lost a baby. What's happening in our hospitals? What's happening there? My husband had the figures. He said, did you know the childhood death rate in America is higher than undeveloped countries? Yes. What's happening in those hospitals? I chose to have most of my babies at home. So if someone's going to hospital to have their baby, I say to them, go in at the last minute. So they haven't got time to interfere.
This video is brought to you by Red River Wellness. If you like this video, please subscribe.
My husband tells the story of his first wife, their second baby. She was in labour, and the doctor said, the heart rate's dropping, we're going to have to do a caesarean. My husband, who was only about 25 at the time, he said, nah. They said, excuse me, Mr. O'Neill, but you could lose mother and baby. He said, no. Now, my husband doesn't know anything medically. He said, I know that God made babies to come out that way. No. You are not doing a Caesar on my wife. Oh, were they upset? Guess what happened? The baby was born. I was reading the report of one obstetrician. He said, most caesareans are unnecessary. Why are they done? And here in Auschwitz, in the most horrific conditions, with high stress, knowing they could be killed at any moment, if a guard got impatient, just kill them. Suffering from severe malnutrition, the most horrific, filthy environment, and she never lost a baby. What's happening in our hospitals? Mind you, the babies didn't live long because of the severe malnutrition, but my point is, no caesareans, 3,000 babies in 2 years, did not lose a baby. Every baby was born live. So what's happening to our babies? I'd like to suggest that we're nearing a time when too many babies, well, I believe there are too many babies are being sacrificed today. It's like the Indian doctor who took his 9-month-old babies to be vaccinated. Within 2 hours, they were both dead. Dear. In Australia, they vaccinate for Hep B within hours of being born. One doctor said, "You are not vaccinating my baby. My baby is not a drug addict or a prostitute." Who gets Hep B? It's time to question. And what you do is you say, "I'll seriously consider your advice. Thank you so much." Smile like an idiot. Thank you. Do you know they're giving you the best they know? Thank you so much for your advice. I'm going to seriously consider this. And as you leave, you say under your breath, "Don't call me, I'll call you." Because it's our God-given right as parents to do what we do to our children. It's our God-given right to say yay or nay. And I believe if there's a problem, your body will give you a sign. That's why it's time to start listening. What's the body saying to you? What's the body saying? Unfortunately, we've gone from Dr. Total Ignorance to Dr. Google. It's like the mother that said, "Barbara, my little 5-year-old boy is usually running around. He's just lying in bed with a fever. I've taken him to emergency. They said there's nothing wrong, but I'm so worried. I've got an appointment to see the gastroenterologist. I think he's got pancreatitis." I said, "What? Where did that come from? Huh? 5-year-old child with pancreatitis?" I said, "Please don't go. I can't tell you what to do, but I would not go." It's quite normal for children to stop eating when they're sick. And it's quite normal for them not to want to eat when they've got a fever. And a fever is quite normal. Just keep them well hydrated. But I said something else that's very important. I said, when you go in to look at your child, don't frown. Because you know what the baby thinks, or the little one thinks? There must be something terribly wrong with me. Smile, even if you don't feel like it. Practice in front of the mirror, smile. Just smile, smile. Do you know what the smile tells to the little one? Everything's all right. And you will soon recover. She wanted to go to that specialist. I said, "What do they got?" They operate, they medicate, they radiate. What does God want us to do? He wants us to educate. Yes, eliminate. And you know that fever with that high sweating? Did you know that you and I, we're actually throwing off quite a bit of waste in these hot weather? And rejuvenate, because we have a body with an inbuilt ability to heal itself. We're constantly being remade. Do you know we've got new eye cells every 2 to 4 days? And I'll tell you something that happened to my little grandson in April. Lennox, he's 6, he's fearless. He would just jump off this stage. And that's what I say to mothers. Women, adults, don't say to the child, "Don't do that, it's dangerous," because it's of a boy. That's exactly what he wants to do. And you know, it's the way God made them. He wants warriors, yeah. So don't soften the road for the little boys. They like it tough. But what Lennox does, he just runs through the grass, full pelt. It's this high, so the next thing we got to cry out, and a piece of grass has cut his eye. Yeah. I don't know what happened, but the eye's red and it's sore. I said, "You'll be right, mate." I cuddled him, held him close. But we're going down the creek. We went down the creek, he was fine. Played in the creek, had fun in the creek. Oh, don't children love water? And you know what? I just let them go. Because if they fall in, you know what I think? I've got 3 minutes. And you know, that's how they learn. Fish them out. As soon as you fish them out, what do? Smile. You know what the smile says? You're right. They learn to respect water. Same with fire. Let them light a fire. Do you hear that? Let them. Because if they get burnt, you know what they learn? They learn to respect fire. And you're there, and when they came running to be burnt, you said, "That's what fire does. Let's put some aloe vera on it." Let them. Under your wise care. Whereas if you don't let them go near water and you don't let them give fire, as soon as your back's turned, what's going on? And your wise care isn't over that. So in the evening I'm reading Noah's Ark. Do you know, fantastic story to read the children. I'm reading it to the children and he goes, my eye's sore. It's really red. I'd like to do something to it, but Lennox is one of those boys, you can't do a thing to him. So I put him to bed, and after about 10 minutes he cries out, my eye, so I just get a cold wet cloth, and just put it on it. Maybe that'll help, maybe it'll distract him. Anyway, he was upset, so I just took him into my bed. Michael slept on the lounge room floor that night. And every time he woke, I just got some castor oil and I rubbed it round the edge of the eye, And I think the castor oil goes deep. It's a great healer. What else can you do? And if you go to hospital, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? I always think that. What are they going to do? So you may as well just massage the eye. And then I thought he needs a painkiller. So I gave him my painkiller as a cayenne pepper capsule. Did you know that cayenne pepper is an analgesic? Did you know that? So I gave him a cayenne pepper capsule. I don't give drugs. And he fell asleep for about 4 hours. Whew, I was glad. Next day, it's swollen, it's weeping. But he was playing handball, running around. See, what you watch, he's fine. And I know that those eye cells, they regenerate very quickly. I don't actually know what's going on in there. Sometimes you don't know. The next day, because we've been so busy, he hadn't talked to his mum. The next day, he does FaceTime with his mum. The next day, the swelling's gone right down, but the eyeball's still a bit red and it's not weeping anymore. So I knew we were getting there. So you look for signs. And then his mum texts me, I'm very worried about Lennox's eye. I think he's going to go blind. This is my daughter-in-law. I sprang up Peter, my son. I said, hey, Pete, it's getting better. He said, she thinks he's going to lose his eyesight. She wants him to see a doctor. Do you know where we live? We live 1 hour out of the town. So Michael found an optometrist, took him in. He looked in Lennox's eyes and he said, very interesting. He said, he's got a 3 millimetre wound on his eye, but he said it's healing beautifully. Now, I already knew that. How did I know that? Because the swelling's gone down and he's not weeping anymore. Do you hear that? See how you're watching. And you're also watching the child. If he was just crying and holding his eye all day, I think then you go a little bit further. But he was playing handball and running round. So you watch the signs, And I said to the doctor, thank you very much. He said, but just in case, give him these eye drops. I said, thanks. Went home, you try and put eye drops in this child. Whew. And I'm not going to force a child. So I said to him, we've got to put these eye drops in, mate. He was, I said, what if, and Pa has dried mango in a jar. I said, what if you get a piece of Pa's dried mango? And I got the nod. Did you see that? You get the will. And when you lie down, your cousin Mark is going to massage your thighs real tight. So I said, are you ready? And I just put the drop not in his eye, just let it fall down there, and I sort of, not particularly fussed if it gets in or not, but I've tried. I've got to say that I'm putting the drops in. Some of my children I could do anything to, but some not so much. Anyway, next day, it's so much better. But I was so glad I could type to the mum, Yes, there's a small wound. It's on the white of the eye. Do you know what that means? It's not involved in vision. And you know what this eye doctor said to me? He said, when someone has a cataract, we just strip that top layer off the eye. And it was just that top layer. He said, because it regenerates every 2 to 3 days. The eyes heal very quickly. That's why if something gets in the eye, you've got to get it out straight away. Otherwise, the eye cells grow over it. And if it's metal, it's a great thing you can do. When we lived out in the rainforest, you become very resourceful because we were 2 hours from town out there. And one guy was working with metal. He got a bit of metal in his eyeball. Whew. So one bright spark said, get a magnet. Put the magnet up and it just shot straight out onto the magnet. Write that down in your natural remedy book. So the eye cells are remade every 3 to 5 or 2 to 4 days. The cells that line our gastrointestinal tract are made every 3 to 5 days. We've got a new skin every month. We've got a new liver under your right rib every 6 weeks, new bones every 3 months, and they're all made according to the formula or according to the pattern in the DNA. In fact, we've got a new body in about 2 years. I used to always say, look after your body, because it's the only one you've got. If your car gets broken down or you smash your car up, you can just buy a new car, but you can't buy a new body. Well, I don't say that anymore. Because once you give your body the right conditions, it's got this inbuilt ability to heal itself. You can just about have a renovated body in about 2 years. Did you hear that? Incredible. Because it's constantly being remade according to the pattern, according to the formula. And it seems like a tiny little thing to say nothing I can do can change the fact that I got blue eyes, white skin, brown hair. Why have I got brown hair when I'm 70? Because my father died at 92 with black hair with a few grey in it. My mother died at 51 with brown hair. So both sides of both chromosomes came through is very little grey. My husband is younger than me and he's totally white because both his parents were white at 50. It's in the DNA, it's in the genes. And this DNA is made up from the food that we eat. The outside strands are made up of polysaccharides. Poly means many. Saccharides just means many sugars, and everything we eat is made up of many sugars. The crossword bands is made up of amino acids, and amino acids is a breakdown from the protein that we eat. So we had delicious amino acids at lunchtime in those little falafels and the hummus. So the proteins coming from the beans, the legumes. And the glue that glues all of these together is minerals. Hippocrates, he called the father of medicine. Hippocrates was 400 years BC. He said, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. And he didn't know what I've just shown you. That our very DNA is made up from the food that we eat. So if we're constantly being remade, let's target the colon, irritable bowel, Crohn's disease. If those cells are remade every 3 to 5 days, why don't we heal in, let's be generous and say, 2 weeks? Is that a reasonable question? It's a very reasonable question. And that's why, remember, at every step, we should be asking why. There is a reason. So let's have a look at how they're made. So we're going to make a new gastrointestinal tract cell, remade every 3 to 5 days. All the information is in the DNA, and the DNA makes a photocopy because the DNA cannot leave the nucleus. Even though it can be stretched out, it cannot leave the nucleus, so to speak. So it makes a photocopy. What an incredible God that He's even put a photocopy machine in our cell. and it's called RNA. RNA is the photocopy of the information in the DNA on how to make a new gastrointestinal tract. And then it comes down to another little section in the cell called ribosome. Ribosome is the little factory where the new cell is made. For purposes of illustration, I'm going to explain it like the building of a brick wall. The first brick goes down. What's the first brick? It's an amino acid, maybe it's phenylalanine. The next brick goes down, maybe it's methionine. The next brick goes down, maybe that's lysine. The next brick goes down, maybe that's tyrosine. Can you see what's happening here? Is every amino acid is like a piece of jigsaw, and it just fits in beautifully with the next one. The more science knows about the inside workings of the body, the more incredible it is. Did you know that the inside of the cell is like a city? It's incredible. There are conveyor belts, and yes, as I'm showing you here, there's even a workshop where the new cell is made. And every 3 to 5 days, out pops a new gastrointestinal tract cell. So how's the new irritable bowel syndrome cell made? Whether it be Crohn's disease, colitis, any inflammation in the gastrointestinal tract. So a photocopy is made, it's called RNA, comes down to the workshop, ribosome, where the new cell is made. The first brick goes down, phenylalanine, and then it's time for methionine, but we've got a problem. And the problem is there's a piece of information missing. Well, what's the body going to do now? It's like the lady that used to make this beautiful cake, and every time she gave out the recipe, she'd leave out one ingredient so no one could make the cake the same as she did. I think it's a bit silly myself. A piece of information's missing. So what are we going to put here? Well, there's a rogue cell. Where'd this rogue cell come from? This rogue cell doesn't fit anywhere. It's a breakdown from environmental poisons, from our exposure to chemicals, even damage from electromagnetic field. And it doesn't fit anywhere in the body, so it's looking for an empty spot. And in it goes, but doesn't fit very well. Maybe lysine is there, but where's it going to fit? And when it comes down to tyrosine, the person is short of amino acids. Why? Because they're drinking with their meals. They're watering down their hydrochloric acid. And your hydrochloric acid is required to be able to break your protein down. So the protein's not getting broken down into amino acids, so it's not getting out of the gut and into the blood. And so that person's short of amino acids. And there's another rogue cell, always looking for somewhere to poke itself, and every 3 to 5 days out pops a new irritable bowel syndrome cell. Now, can you see from what I just explained to you, it's not just one thing. It's a variety of things, but what I want to look at is what causes the damage. And aren't there enzymes that are constantly going up and down to heal any glitches, to heal the DNA? Yes. But if the person's lacking the basic nutrients to make those enzymes, can you see not even that can be healed? So let's have a look at what causes damage in the DNA. Now, do you remember when we were looking at Psalm 139, it said, my substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being imperfect. Did you get that bit? Do you know what that means? We are all born with a slightly imperfect DNA today. Because of our parents' habits, because of our parents' exposure to environmental poisons. And that explains why my father had severe asthma. I'm one of 5 children. The first 4 escaped the gene, but the 5th one got it. Severe asthma. I remember my baby sister, the ambulance came twice to the home to take her away. She nearly died. My father conquered it at the age of 50 when he stopped dairy. My younger sister, she conquered it at the age of 40 when she stopped wheat and dairy and learnt the Buteyko method of breathing to help control asthma attacks. So imagine my concern when my 5th child got a cold and I saw the signs, severe asthma. I saw him in severe breathing distress from his nostrils to his hips. His whole body would go like this with each breath. Oh, it's a scary thing. So I would rush to hospital for the fear of saving the life of my baby. When I'd go into the hospital, the look on their face told me my baby was near death. My baby was not able to breathe. But you know what I noticed? I think I did that about 4 times. What I noticed, that what helped Peter the most was for me to just hold him. Just hold him upright. Keep him safe. Well, he felt safe when he was with me. And I remember one night, this was after we'd been to a naturopath, said do hot and cold treatments on him, that will help. We came home late from town. It was storming. And I could see Peter's breathing getting worse and worse. We finally got all the kids out and into the house in this storm. And I said to my first husband, Peter's very sick. We need to go to hospital. He said, he'll be all right. Look at the storm. The kids are asleep. He'll be right. And he went to bed. And I knew I should get the hot and cold compresses on his chest, but I could not lay him down. I had to hold him. So I thought what I'll do is I'll sit upright in bed and I'll pray to God and fight for the life of my child. And so I prayed, Father, please save the life of my child. And the next thing I knew, I'd fallen asleep and I woke up again. I'd fallen asleep at my post and I fought for the life of my child. His breathing was heavy on my chest, but there was nothing else I could do. And then I prayed the prayer that is the hardest prayer that a mother has ever prayed. I knew I couldn't keep awake. I knew I could do it no longer. I said, Father, take him. He's yours. Oh, how hard is that? Because I knew I was falling asleep. I knew I couldn't fight for him any longer. So I surrendered my child to God. And then I fell asleep. And I woke up in the morning with a start. I woke up with a start expecting my baby to be dead, and he was breathing normally. Whoa. Did I learn a lesson that night? I can't save the life of my child. Only God can. And what is God waiting for? Surrender. I thought when I surrendered the life of my child to God, I would be basically giving my child a death sentence. Who am I? I'm a nobody. I'm just another person. God basically was saying, give him to me. Give him to me. And you know, when I gave him to God, I relaxed. Even though I knew it might mean that my child would die. Because I just put my boy in the hands of the hands that made the worlds, yeah? That calmed the sea. I learned a lesson that night. What I discovered was that the road to Peter's healing was not quick. It took a lot of hard work. But by the age of 2.5, he no more had asthma. In page 127 of the Ministry of Healing, it says, the use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many aren't prepared to give. But oh dear, is it worth it? So whenever Peter would get a cold, he would be in breathing distress within 24 hours. The naturopath said do hot and colds on his chest, compresses, give him an enema. I had just had to distract my little boy while I quickly gave him the enema. He was allowed to hold his elder brother's submarine motor with the propeller. I could have done anything to Peter at that moment. He could hold something he's not allowed to touch. You just got to become resourceful, parents, resourcefuls. When I gave him that enema, the breathing distress cut down from 24 hours to 5 hours. Whew. That is the best result I've seen of everything I tried. And I discovered that the very drug they gave him, which was Ventolin, it reduces lung capacity. The very drug they give to help with asthma is actually causing more harm to their lungs. But it took work. I used to engage all the children. One child will have the cold packs, the other child will have the elder child would have the hot water, and another child would have the books there. We'd read Peter's story after story while we did the hot and colds on his chest. Every time Peter got a cold after that and we did this, the breathing distress got less and less and less. And then when I went into labour and my birth of my 6th baby, Peter got a cold. Right at that point, what am I tempted with? What if Peter goes into breathing distress and I'm in heavy labour, and when Peter's sick he only wants his mum? But you know what I decided to do? I decided to choose this emotion, faith. I had done all that was humanly possible. I had done my part, and God did not fail me. Peter never got breathing distress again. My father conquered it at 50, my sister conquered it at 40, my son Peter, who was diagnosed with severe physiological asthma, was conquered at 2.5, praise God. And that's how I know that genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And when I tell mothers what I did, sometimes they turn away sorrowful. It's just too hard. And so when the naturopath rang me up and said, Barbara, I'm going to the Asthma Foundation. You know more than me. Did you hear that? This highly qualified naturopath said, I know more than him. How did I learn? By just doing it. By just doing it and observing what helped and what did not help. I told him everything that I did. He rang me up 2 days later. He said, I went to the Asthma Foundation. I told them everything that you had done. I told them Peter's story. He said, Peter's the worst case I have ever seen. Now I remember the naturopath said, everything you're doing to Peter, he will be as strong as an ox. I should show you a photo of Peter. Looks like a bodybuilder. He's strong. And what he said was true. Everything I did to Peter, he is as strong as an ox. The naturopath said, when he'd finished the meeting, a mother came up to him. He said, it's as if this mother was relating Peter's story. But she had chosen the medical way. Why did she choose the medical way? That's all she knew. Isn't that true with so many? It's all they know. Isn't that the way we're raised? We're raised to think when you get sick, what do? Go to the doctor. Go to emergency. It's not God's way. That's not God's plan. God created a body that can heal itself. And there are simple, natural treatments. And what did that cost me to do an enema, to do hot and colds? It cost me nothing but time. And remember, the first time, breathing distress went from 24 hours down to 5, but that 5 hours was still a bit tough. But I had to have faith. I had to have faith. And eventually, God gave me the prize. When I was in heavy labour with my 6th baby, Peter did not go into breathing distress. Took work, but it was well worth it. So yes, the use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many aren't prepared to give. But in the end, it will be found that nature untrammeled does her work wisely and well. Genetics may load the gun, but it is lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And the naturopath said to me, this mother described Peter. And this little boy was 7. I think at that age Peter was about 6. He said, this little boy is on steroids for his asthma. He's on a glycerin enema every second day because the steroids have constipated him so badly, and they've given him 2 weeks to live. And he said, and look at Peter. Well, when I got off that phone, I just had to sit there quietly and just praise the great God of heaven for the path he'd led me through. So that song that we sang when we first started, can't we all testify to that? Oh, I've been through great tribulation, especially that stormy night, feeling and thinking that my baby was about to die. Whew. But you know, God knows the way that we take. That's what Job says. He knows the way that I take. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Though he slay me, yet I will trust him. So what causes damage in the DNA? What causes damage in the DNA is chemicals. What causes damage in the DNA is, believe it or not, refined sugar. Refined sugar causes blood sugar levels to rise dramatically, then drop. You can have a child born with a genetic DNA to their pancreas because of the parent's sugar habits. Caffeine causes a crisis response in the body. So what caffeine does, it disrupts the neurotransmitters in the brain. You can have a baby born with a tendency to autism, attention deficit syndrome because of the parent's caffeine habits. Now, it doesn't tell you that on the coffee packet, does it? Alcohol. Children are being born today with fetal alcohol syndrome to parents that have 2 drinks a week. Eeh. Tobacco. We've got children born today that have left alveoli in their lungs because of their parents' smoking habits. Eeh. Chemicals. The biggest chemical company in the world is the pharmaceutical company. Drugs. Drugs never cure disease. They just change the form and location. Monosodium glutamate causes the nerve cells on the tongue to overfire. Eeh. That causes damage to the nerve cells. Mold. Mold splices into the DNA of trees, of plants, and reproduces itself. Get out of that mouldy house. But one of the biggest causes of damage to the DNA, the research is showing, 92% of DNA damage is caused, more than all of this, is a mineral deficiency. Oh, why a mineral deficient? Do you know all of these are leaching the minerals out because they cause such a toxic condition in the body? And 50 years ago, the soil had twice as many nutrients that it had today. So people are eating food that is mineral deficient, taking things that further leach the minerals. No wonder. No wonder we've got a sick world. No wonder we've got a sick nation. And I thank God that the answer is so simple through the Sustain Me principles that I presented. Nutrition, water, sunshine, stop what's hurt, but we need to know what hurts to know how to stop it. So simple. And I thank God that we are not subject to our genes, we're not subject to the germs. We can give the body the right conditions and our body will heal.